Well, good morning and welcome to Business Analytics Collaborative and to our expert briefing series. And today it's with Krish Krishnan. Welcome, Krish.
Thank you, Rich.
Krish is a recognized world leader and expert in strategy and architecture and implementation of high-performance data warehouse solutions. He's a visionary and a data warehouse thought leader, which is very appropriate for today's topic. So, Krish, I want to say again, thank you for joining us, and it's great having you on the program.
Absolutely, Rich. Absolutely. In fact, what more to start off the discussion with the Cubs win, right? So, phenomenal. Yes.
Yes, that's true. And yeah, so for those listening in the future, they'll know exactly what day we recorded this.
Yes.
But this is a great topic because there's been a lot written about big data and big data platforms, and there's so many people doing so many different things. The relevance of that, of the platform and kind of the direction that people should take is a discussion that we should have, especially when you look at thought leaders or industry leaders like Teradata and IBM and Microsoft all coming out with integrated solutions, excuse me. And then you have Amazon and Google coming out with cloud solutions. You know, what's relevant? What isn't? And if our members are looking at a big data solution and a platform to really support that, where should they focus, Krish?
Very interesting conversational start, Rich. In fact, taking a step back, my most recent career change was this week. I started as the Chief Technology Officer with a company in DC called Ampcus. And somebody asked me, what pulled you into going corporate again? Was it the role? Was it the company? Was it data? What decision point drove you to that, switch if you wanted to wear a different hat? The answer is the same. Whether you're asking me on the focus of big data platforms or the focus of any company or any enterprise, whether it's the government or a private sector company, the focus has to be on what is the business value that we deliver. End of the day, the question is, are we tethering data across different segments to deliver business value? Now, you and I have had multiple Starbucks conversations at different locations on the same subject with different thought leaders in our space. And what we have repeatedly heard from them is, I can do analytics the best, I can do governance the best, I can do security in these technologies the best. I can provide skills in these technologies the best. We haven't heard a whole spectrum story, even if it is some of our vendors in the market space that you just mentioned, including Amazon and Google. We're seeing a lack of depth in the ability of these guys to tether the gap, if you will, between infrastructure and analytics, right? So infrastructure starts with a storage platform for data. Analytics ends with delivering business value. Enterprise focus, I think, are three specific areas if you ask my personal perspective. Number one, you need to have a very strong analytics team because you want to deliver the KPIs and the insights, not just in terms of numbers, not just in terms of Excel spreadsheet reports, but I'm talking about a line of information. In fact, when I talk about a line of information, Rich, I'm talking about data lineage in these platforms. That is something that we can deliver out of the box today. So focus on a very strong analytics team that can look at not just the insights, but dive down into the layers that led you to get that insight, number one. Number two, do not discard anything that has been built. You need something to run the business. When we say big data platforms, we are adding more to change the business, which means the run the business databases, the run the business analytics, the technologies that they have invested into. Do not wrap them and throw them away. I'll take you back to a very simple, discussion that I had a chance to, hear with Amar Adwala in 2009 when he was introducing Hadoop. He said, your RDBMS is like your sports car, fine-tuned, it can run the race. Hadoop is like a cargo train. Throw anything on it, it's going to chuck, go from point A to point B, deliver what you've thrown on it, and you can work with whatever is on it, depending on how you want to realize value from it. If you take that perspective in the enterprise and talk about big data platforms, whether it is Hadoop or NoSQL or integrated RDBMS, it's a cloud. It doesn't matter where the technology platform is. Keep that on one perspective, bring a data platform perspective. This is one of the goals that BAC has, which is very surprising to a lot of folks. We're focusing on the data aspect of the journey. We are looking at how can data be threaded from start to finish. Now, the second layer is to keep everything that you've built and add more to it. The third layer of focus should be on securing the data. Securing the data means you're looking at security beyond just where we were, not 5 years ago, beyond where we were about a month ago. Because this whole space of opening up with all these technologies brings about gaps that can cause chaos in the enterprise. So those are some interesting perspective points, if you will, that we can kick off our conversation with in terms of where should an enterprise focus. Now, there's multiple layers you can peel across, these threads, if you will, and you can stitch back. So the last but not the least, to give you a perspective, is never forget governance. We don't like governance. Trust me, I mean, a lot of executives feel you're measuring me, I don't want to be measured. No, it's not measuring you. It's about putting compliance in place. If you don't have compliance, you can't deliver business value. If you want to deliver business value, you need compliance. So that challenge is met by governance. So now the three-legged stool in my answer is boiling it up, have the right people, make sure the processes are perfect, add the technologies as you want. Absolutely fine. Whether it is SQL, whether it is Scala, whether it is Go, whether it is JavaScript, whether it's Python, it doesn't matter what it is. Add the skills that you need as long as you can integrate it. What do you think?
I think it's great. And I love this last point because, and I actually think that governance is going to make a big comeback here because so much of our analysis today, I think, is done without some data lineage, without kind of an understanding of how this all knits together. And it's not clear to me that just because we've put great tools on top of this data, that we're seeing the best value or even the most appropriate value.
Correct.
So, but let's back up a little bit because I think there's a great discussion. So what is big data? Where's that line around big data and what is big data? Because I think lots of hype around it. It sometimes gets really confusing what it is.
Absolutely. I'll tell you the Krish perspective of big data, right? I mean, I'll first tell you the Doug Lenny perspective of what Doug started off when he defined this term. He said data which has extensive volume, high levels of velocity of data coming in, and a variety of formats. So high volume, high velocity, high variety. He said everything has to be high, high, high. That data can be categorized or called as big data. Now, after he made that definition, in the last 9 years, I've heard white data, fat data, small data, thin data, thick data, dark data, light data, semi-light data, deep data. I'm like, every time I hear something being put to the word data, I just laugh because end of the day, big data gives data a classification segment by which not only are we looking at volume, velocity, variety. That's a challenge we've been having for the last 100 years. Ever since we started computing, that's what we've been dealing with. What big data brings to the table that enterprises need to understand is it has ambiguity built in. It has a lot of ambiguity because you are not knowing where the data is coming from. So you have to identify how to plug and play that data segment as it comes in. Now, ambiguity leads you to complexity. One doesn't exist without the other. In the world of chaos, you need both. Otherwise, it's not chaos, right? So as long as this ambiguity comes in, it brings complexity of processing. This is where enterprise architects dread because it takes an enterprise a minimum of 5 to 7 years in the database journey to become very relevant with what they're trying to drive from an insights perspective. Now you're bringing in, chaos by saying bring in Hadoop or bring in a NoSQL or bring in a combination of both. And then you're telling them, oh, by the way, you know what? In order to get rid of this chaos, you will need to add some governance. You will still need MDM. You will still need metadata. And you are not giving them directions which are supposed to be big data directions. So the confusion becomes even more. First of all, I have ambiguity. I have processing complexity. Now I'm hearing everybody in the data space saying, oh, you know what, you have to put MDM on top of it. You need to put governance on top of it. You need more semantic metadata layers on top of it. What the hell am I supposed to do as an architect? Am I looking at technology or am I looking at data? So here is my definition. Big data is categorized as data in a corporation that cannot be processed using traditional data management techniques and technologies. So I'm not looking at big data as something that's going to come and, it's a light at the end of the tunnel and it's a train. I'm looking at big data as something that cannot be managed with the technologies or the processing techniques I have today. Why? Because of the characteristics of that data. Now, when I put it in that categorization of classifying big data, a lot of executives have always asked, do you think we are ready for it? Do you think we can make it work? We know that Amazon and Facebook can do it, but why us? And I think my comeback has always been, whether I have done this in my conferences or whether I'm doing it as an executive briefing, you want to be competitive. You want to differentiate. You want to be a leader in your industry segment. You want to be looked upon as somebody who's becoming more visionary and more transparent. And note those terms, right? More visionary and more transparent. That brings about the need to segment big data in, to push those technologies in and bring them in. Now, whether you want to do it on the cloud, you want to go Google Cloud, Amazon, Microsoft Azure, that's your choice. You want to do it on-prem, all the vendors are having technology partnerships. Whether you want to make it a hybrid solution, all of those are possible from an implementation perspective, but from a definition perspective, you want to categorize and put data into the enterprise that was never available before, and it has certain characteristics that need to be dealt with. Hence, you want to classify, categorize, and segment it from a storage perspective into a platform.
So that's awesome. And with that definition of big data, it then lends itself very nicely to how or how to characterize the requirements of basically a big data platform. Because now you can draw a line between that data that historically you've been able to process versus your definition of things you haven't processed. And that says, okay, if you haven't processed it, then I need a different kind of platform.
Yes. In fact, I would take this. Now, this is a very interesting perspective we're talking about, because here is where, when I speak about this topic, I get very passionate in one segment. You need not a data lake. You need not a data hub. You need a data swamp. A lot of folks dread when they hear this word, data swamp. Absolutely, because I want to be able to acknowledge that I'm collecting data that is low in quality, that is ambiguous in its source, that has complexity of formats that I need to understand, that may require constant streaming, constant monitoring. It may require me to bring in some technologies that are going to superimpose themselves and help me process data faster. In fact, Rich, if you remember, in our last meeting, in the last month or two with, the Semarkey CEO, Sala went and said, hey, you give me data, I'll show you how to derive value from it. I have a process that I've done for so many years now that I can help you do it from a monitoring / processing perspective. That is the kind of a value add I'm looking at when we talk processing. So I would want a swamp, because I'm ready to take dirty data and put it in. And I would call it dirty data, because if it is not dirty, then why do you want to cleanse it? Why do you want to format it? Why do you want to build a lake? And then why do you want to build a hub and all the so on and so forth characteristics to make it analytical in nature? So create a swamp, process the dirty data. You have the business teams now having ability to look at raw data as is. They can run operational analytics. Now those guys will come and say, we can't work with a swamp which is deep and wide. We want to build data lakes specific to our requirements. Now you can build not one, multiple data lakes. And no lake is clear at the bottom. If you go in deep down into a lake, man-made or natural, lakes are always swampy and deep segmented at the bottom. So obviously this data lake is going to have its source come from the swamp, and that manifests itself in a natural processing order. This is where you apply semantics. This is where you apply metadata, MDM, whatever you want to do, create enrichment. Now from the lakes, the data science analytics guys are going to come in and say, this is good, but you know what? Make it structural. Make it structured enough for us to use. And this is where we are seeing a lot of technology work come through, right? Even in the most recent release of Hadoop, we're going to get Apache Kudu, which is the columnar database that Cloudera has brought about that can be laid alongside with HDFS in the technology layer of Hadoop, which means I can have a swamp and then I can have a lake/hub built in a real quick, scale up and scale out. When you're looking at, that kind of a hub, then you become even more nitty-gritty. You're going to become so structured. You're going to create table-like formats. You're going to share data across analytical platforms, including the data warehouse. And then you have the mashup in the ecosystem that's going to deliver itself to provide business value from analytics. I think this processing landscape is something that people have not heard of or have heard of, but when they go into the processing, they get confused because there is no standard set saying this is the way you should build a big data platform in the enterprise. This is how you process big data in the enterprise. We're all developing a lot of books, articles, white papers, and think of it. This journey is 5 years old for us. Hadoop is 10 years old. NoSQL is 10, 12 years old. This journey is very new for us because the internet companies that started off all these data segments, and Rich, you know this, being on the other side of the world where you've seen this grow up from a reporting analytics mashup and visualization. The internet side of the world has a different set of requirements than the enterprise side of the world. So obviously, every enterprise is going to go through a journey of learning. But in the end of the day, there are some visionaries, there are some people who have struggled through the layers. They're not completely mature yet. If you ask me, are they 5 out of 5 on maturity? Are they the top? No, nobody is mature yet to that point. But are they getting there? Will they be there? I am very sure in the next 5 years, we're going to see that happen in a lot of use cases in the enterprise.
It's a great point because having come out of the relational market for many years, that was a market where it was 15 years before we were really getting kind of the maximum value out of that technology. There was lots of things to learn.
Yes.
So we're relatively new on this kind of big data platform journey. And so you made a great case for why infrastructure is important.
Yes.
And then the question it begs is, boy, is this the same skill set or is it different skill sets that we're going to need for this? And are those available?
Now you're asking the Chinese torture question. No, I'm just kidding. Skill sets in this big data industry have become a big debate issue, if you will. I mean, there is not a single day that passes by without people talking about, I need to hire a PhD from XYZ Ivy League schools. I need to bring in 20 guys from this statistical institute. No, I think end of the day, business insights are all going to be delivered with the in-house experts who've been building this for a number of years, AKA the business SMEs. And those are folks who are well-versed in Microsoft Excel, who are well-versed in computing techniques where they can compute and store at the same place, which is what these platforms in the past have shown us. The niche platforms these guys have used always have been ready to adopt to something like a Tableau or something like a Drill as a technology that can help them mash up and navigate data back and forth as needed. Last but not the least, and this is something I'm going to say, and everybody is going to be like, huh, what? They're all SQL savvy. To me, the one skill that everybody need to focus on still to keep running the organization is SQL. And that is why we are pushing SQL on Hadoop. That is why we're making this a lot more user-driven so that forget the infrastructure, forget all the noise that you hear in the background. You wanted data, here is data. Now you go and tell me, how are you going to slice and dice this data set? You tell me how you want to put metadata to it. You tell me where do you want me to bring newer vendors in the ecosystem who can stand up and play the game with you much better. I think those pieces will all be driven once we put this skill noise to bed. So number one skill needed, to be successful in big data is not going to be a Python or a JavaScript. It is going to be a very strong, robust SQL knowledgeable team. Now, in that team, obviously, you need more focus areas. So you want statisticians, you want people with mathematical backgrounds, you want people who are experts in marketing, you want people who are experts in e-commerce, you want people who are experts in supply chain. So all these segments are sitting within business teams today. And that is why whenever I talk about data science, it's not a single person job. I always say it's a team. You want to bring these guys who are these business me's, put them with the data processing guys. So pull that out of IT. So there is no, hey, business and IT, this cross the fingers will never happen, right? Everybody's in the same team, you sink or swim together. Then add to it a mashup of statisticians, add to it a mashup of IT, add to it a mashup of governance teams, and then executives to sponsor. Now you have a team that can talk the same language, top down, bottom up. And you know what? It's not a pyramid, it's a rectangle or a square, if you will, because you're having multiple forces joining together to tether this journey. Is this the way that Amazon succeeded? Is this the way Facebook succeeded? Is this the way Google succeeded? They are all not going to give you case studies on how they built their teams. But if you look at how they succeeded from where they were 10 years ago to where they are today, this is the journey they have taken through. And this is what we need enterprises to embrace, that we have skills, we need to add some, but it is not about laying off what we have and hiring everything new, because we're going to lose a lot of value if we do that.
You know, it's such a great perspective, because all the hype about kind of people has been around data scientists, and the implication there is people that, you know, kind of know algorithms and mathematics, and folks that on the other end that know these kind of new technologies. And your point is, you know, SQL is still living, alive, well. And oh, by the way, the thing we've learned over and over again in this industry is those people that can bridge the business back to the data are absolutely the key. And I wish we'd talk about that a little bit more, because if we did, I think a lot of these implementations would be a lot more successful out there.
Yeah, you bet. In fact, I'll tell you, Rich, I mean, we've had this discussion a few times in the past too. Whenever I get to doing some strategy on, you know, a Hadoop or a big data platform, my first question that I ask these folks is, guys, what is the business goal you have? And you look at a lot of these teams, they look back at you with like, what did you smoke? Can I get some of that? What business goal? We've been told this is cheap technology, we brought it in. What business drive should we have to be successful in this journey? And believe it or not, in fact, I remember about 2 years ago, you know, Paul Kautza and I were doing some white paper stuff together, and the vendor with whom we were working had a very you know, specific perspective they wanted to deliver in the white paper. And I was against it, because I said this goes against my principles as being, you know, recognized as a thought leader in the industry. And then Paul came back and said, well, instead of saying that you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink it, just say the fact that there is a lot of water, you're taking the horse to multiple sources of water, it's up to the horse to drink it. He said re-verbiage, right? So I think going back to the success measurement factor, when I have started engaging in these projects, the first question I ask is, what is the business goal? People come back with, what? What business goal? So if there is no business goal, don't enter into this journey, because it's not about buying Hadoop. It's not about saying, hey, I saved $1 million of my license in Oracle or Teradata or IBM or Microsoft, and I put it into Hadoop. This journey requires a lot more than that, because those platforms are going to be still needed by the business, but can't be used by the business all the time. So you're creating alternatives, and those business goals are the critical success factor point, because everything else tethers on to that business goal.
That's awesome. And people should look at that. I mean, so many times it's this technology is better than that technology, when in fact, if what we're doing is bringing more relevant new data into these environments, we ought to be increasing the value and not competing with each other about what technology is better. So it's a great discussion.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I get a question about all the time from the segment, I will say, from the C-suite, and that is, what are we supposed to know? because so many times they hear these buzzwords about, you know, Hadoop and this platform and that technology, and they've been traditional users of kind of, you know, older technologies that have bode well for them, and they go, now what should I do? You know, where do I go? What do I need to know?
What do I need to know? So from an executive perspective, let me put it this way. You know, there are a lot of conferences where they're talking about this topic. I mean, Gartner does it, Forrester does it, so does McKinsey. All these big guys have their own little suites of conferences. But if the executive really wants to understand how they should succeed in this journey, they should remove the cap of being a vendor-specific, or vendor-driven, a marketplace-driven executive, right? I mean, a lot of times you and I have seen CIOs, CXOs, when you talk to them, they will listen and they'll say, yeah, this makes sense in a big data program. And then at the end of the discussion, they'll come back and say, you know what, we're an Oracle company. Can we talk to Oracle about their Exalytics appliance? And then you're like, I've been trying to drill something into your brain, Mr. Executive, that go above and beyond just being tied to one vendor. And a lot of times they're like, we're not sure. So the executive is supposed to actually know three things. One, you need to succeed in this new world, which means go beyond just the programs that you've been attending as an executive. There are a lot of universities doing executive level coaching on big data programs today. I know Stern has one, I know Columbia has one, I know WashU in St. Louis has one, U Chicago has one. There are some executive programs that go for about 8 weeks. And you know, I've been a part of putting the curriculum together of, you know, a few of these universities for those programs. And they help the executives get a good understanding, because it's beyond looking at vendors, it's beyond governance, it's beyond measurement. You want to be able to succeed. Second, always understand this. We would not want to use a CMMI level 5 or a Six Sigma kind of a process technique for big data, but program management, you know, running the PMO, measuring the spend, measuring the success factor deliveries, measuring the value that comes in an agile perspective is still needed to be run. So the executives need to realign their thinking on how they want to bring that to the executive forum, right? Because you want to have those guys put their budgets out and say, this is how much we can spend, and this is how much we are willing to be measured to spend by. And that's the third point, is when they go through these courses and have these discussions, be open to accept that you will have to create changes. And changes doesn't mean you're firing somebody and hiring somebody. It's about putting somebody in a newer role, putting somebody in a challenging position that they've never been in before, and providing them the support. So I think these are the three key points. One is seek some of these courses out so that you get a lot more, you know, visibility, understand the program management perspective, and last but not the least, be a change agent so that you can create value in the company. Those are the executive learnings.
Yeah, this awesome discussion today, Krish. I really appreciate you being here. And I think, Ryan, we have a question that's come in from the audience.
Sure.
Right. So here's the question. What role does project or program management play in big data? And what skill sets should they have? People who are kind of in those roles, what skill sets should they have?
Fantastic question. In fact, I was mentioning it in that executive discussion point of what the executive should know. So from a project/program management perspective, it is a very vital part of a big data program, because A, you're only bringing in more data. B, you still need to have measurements applied to monitor and implement this data segment journey as you go through. The skill sets that these project managers and program managers need to have is the ability to integrate diverse teams together, because now you're not having just one small team that you're running or one segment of teams that you're responsible for. You are running a large team of people across the organization. So they need to become a lot more facilitative. They need to become a lot more, you know, if you will, instructional, if you will, in the meeting perspective itself, so that they're able to give the right kind of instructions to who needs to deliver what and apply governance, if you will. So they need to be empowered with governance, and they need to be able to accept the change that's going to come through. But this is a very, very key aspect in the whole big data program success for any organization. Absolutely.
So that just begs another question, Krish. I'm going to throw one from right field at you here.
Sure.
With this whole, I totally agree about how you need to have program management involved. And how does that change when we start talking about agility being brought into this process? And what impact does that have on these traditional processes that we've used?
Yeah, that's
and maybe, by the way, maybe that's for another 30-minute segment at some point, but at least for today, I was curious about your thoughts.
I'll give you a 30-second answer for sure. Agility is something we've been trying for the last 25 years to bring through into the back-end processing of the data platform. The front-end apps, we have learned how to do agility, right? So the back-end platform, agility is going to be derived when you're becoming a lot more smarter in segmenting the processing of data across the different tiers of the platform that we spoke about earlier, swamp to lakes to hubs to analytic mashups. As long as you know how to do those segmentations, you will get a lot more agile because now you're working with streaming data, you're working with data that is having different behavior patterns of manifestation. You want to be able to get more smarter, you want to get more business value from wider, bigger data segments. So when you look at all those pieces, you will apply the agility to dissecting the data processing to segments of value delivery, which means you're changing your programming approach, which means you're changing your implementation approach, but it is still a project that still needs to be managed. And like you said, this is another 30-minute segment for the future. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and it does come back to, what are we going to do for the business as opposed to what technology we're going to do.
Oh, absolutely. And the business users are a part of the data science team. So I would say what we're going to do for the business, they need to come to the table with that thought of what they want to drive. And the data guys will understand what data techniques need to be used. And that is, like you said, again, another segmentation for discussion.
Ryan, do we have another question?
Yeah, one more here. So similar topic, but talking now about enterprise architects. So what is the role of an enterprise architect in the big data world? Does it largely remain the same? How can an EA adapt to this world?
So enterprise architects are still going to be around, whether we do big data, small data, fat, wide, deep, thick, thin, water, dark, light, whatever you call data with, no worries. The reason being, the enterprise architect is somebody who knows what the enterprise backbone is from data source acquisition all the way to analytic delivery. So their role, while it remains the same, is going to change from a fact that they will now have a lot more freedom to innovate, which they lacked before. That freedom to innovate comes from the fact that the big data platform gives you the swamp. It gives you the ability to look at a lot more range of data segments and a lot more experimental areas that one can run with and do a lot more discovery, if you will. And that should change the way the architect innovates. And when that changes, whether it's the analytics architect doing SAS or SPSS or KXAN or R, or it is the reporting architect who is responsible for our reporting and visualization, it's the guy who's doing the business side of driving a Tableau or a Click type of technologies, they all can converge because now everybody's talking on the data platform. So their role remains largely the same, but they will have a lot more visibility into the data platform than they ever did before.
And that may be the biggest change that I think this big data platform is going to bring to the market in general, and that is an opportunity to innovate. And I think that's a great note to end on today. Ryan, unless we have another question, I just want to thank Krish for being here today. Thank you for joining us for this briefing series. And love to have you back and talk about a couple other subjects in the near future, Krish. It's been great having you.
Same here, Rich. It was wonderful to talk. Thank you.